Prime Video had such a hit on its hands with Shiny Happy People Duggar Family Secrets, and the comments were so prolific asking the series to take a look at another so-called evangelical Christian organization that they couldn't say no. Shiny Happy People, a teenage holy war, takes a look at Teen Mania and the lives that were affected by it. Once America's largest evangelical youth organization, Teen Mania attracted millions of young people through stadium events like Acquire the Fire and its Honor Academy internship program. This season exposes disturbing practices, mock persecution simulations, dangerous missionary trips, and the shift towards militant rhetoric and political activism through its battle cry movement. Just like with the first season, if you have any sort of trauma or baggage from evangelical Christianity, this could be triggering for you. I know it was for my wife and myself. Now, the series takes first-hand accounts of young people who are now in their 30s, who spent time in the depths of Teen Mania, participating in the highest echelons and experiencing the growing abuse of power, and then allows them to rawly recount their trauma. Now, this is a harrowing and emotionally exhausting 3-episode series, because not only do we get to hear all of the survivors describe in horrific detail what they endured, but then it's balanced and reinforced through video footage and audio recordings. And before anybody winds up to pound on the keyboards, the survivors, and even the show, acknowledge that while the abusive treatment and exploitative conditions were rampant, not every single person who was involved in Teen Mania, or who attended their events, went on trips, or were even in the Honor Academy internship had a horrid story. Some people had an excellent time. I even have a friend who met his now wife at the Honor Academy, and while it may have been sketchy, he never mentioned anything negative other than working really long hours. But he was also on the tech team, so that made sense to my brain at the time. But despite not every single person experiencing trauma, there were still a large number that did. Thus, the docuseries. Now, some background on this, especially if you're not familiar at all with Teen Mania. It was a Christian organization that was started in the 90s by this dude named Ron Luce. Now, Luce was charismatic, highly energetic, and very persuasive. He gained some popularity and then traction during kind of the heyday of Christian rock, where the music was mirroring some of the mainstream content in sound. And just like with most Christian organizations, they're working to counter-program whatever society is gravitating to. So kind of like MTV's The Week in Rock or MTV News, where current events and hot topics were discussed, Ron Luce was on the evangelical side, producing stuff that was all geared towards Christian information. Now, Luce found that he was resonating with teenagers and then gained popularity with church youth groups, leading to small events that then blossomed into massive arena shows like Acquire the Fire that toured the U.S. And then these were fully produced by teenage interns. Now, the parent corporation, Teen Mania, continued to grow and expand, with Luce gaining more popularity and then even more political oomph. And this led to the formation of the Honor Academy, this internship program for those teens who wanted to get more involved with their faith and the organization. Some of the details were shown through this series I'd never know. Now, some are mildly benign, like to attend the Honor Academy, the teens had to pay their room and board. They were just truly unpaid interns, so they had to save big bucks to go through this. But then there's video documentation that were shown of how the academy morphed and became extremely militant, using Navy SEAL-style training and endurance tests to judge the quality and the merit of the kids. Now, I don't know about you, but I've seen G.I. Jane, and I would be ringing that bell right out of the gate. These kids, though, were subjected to not only the physical rigor, but also verbal and emotional abuse. And that's what this series really homes in on, the various forms of abuse that the teens experienced. And it's not just with that insane training regimen either. We hear heartbreaking stories of disastrous trips to foreign countries where medical issues aren't taken seriously by the staff. Teens in the call centers at Teen Mania headquarters missing out on sleep or food because they're afraid of not meeting their call quota. There's also the extremism that is forced upon the kids, placing tightly constrained rules on them, and then encouraging through reinforcement the positives of ratting others out in the name of accountability. And because we see how deeply entrenched these victims were in their faith, the organization was able to exploit that and use it for emotional and behavioral control, guilting the students into actions and mentalities that are not only counter to the Bible, which they purport to follow, but also scarring them psychologically to where self-harm becomes the only viable option of escape. Now, the interviews are raw and they're personal, but also presented in a way that we get to be close when emotions are high and fragile, and then farther back to provide not only a safety bubble for them, but to allow the audience to become more of a spectator to these interviews. As these alternated, we go from being a confidant, listening to someone painfully relive their trauma, to a detached observer who can then take in facts and experiences to then form our own opinions. Now, the series does an excellent job of chronicling the events from Teen Mania's rise all the way to its fall. And as the timeline approaches the collapse of the organization, we get to hear and read from so many more victims. While the several who appear on camera are powerful and affecting, there are blog posts that serve as an excellent reinforcement of the interviewees' accounts. The snowball effect that occurs when one former survivor writes this blog post, it is disturbingly impressive. The stories are grotesque and maddening, detailing out all the ways these teens were physically, emotionally, and psychologically taken advantage of, all in the name of God, which does tend to be a trend within the evangelical arena. Now, despite Teen Mania shutting down in 2015, which is another whole crap show, the documentary brings the story around to the present to showcase how relevant all this information is within the current political environment. The battle cry movement, which was also started by Luce, was this mobilization of teens and a weaponization of zealous beliefs to influence and ultimately control politics. So we get to see the transition of teens and early 20-somethings going from rallies and protests to far right-wing talkers like Potato Head Charlie Kirk and Jack Posobiec. I think that's how you say his name, doesn't really matter, who garner massive influence with young white males, who then in turn show up at the voting booth to further the far-right agenda. This is an excellent docuseries, exposing the lengthy abuse and manipulation of teenagers all in the name of organized religion. And while I'm sure this isn't unique only to the evangelical world, Teen Mania was an influential and monster-sized organization that used its popularity and influence to draw in droves of students, damaging many for the purposes of organizational growth and political gain. The interviews are captured to allow the vulnerability and hurt to shine through the survivors, while also giving them strength through their resolve to share their accounts. The archival footage is damning, and thanks to more than a decade of video and audio, the proof of vilification, injustice, and just general harm is irrefutable, shedding light on a darkness that will hopefully allow other survivors to finally recover. There's no sex or nudity, some profanity, and then some violence. Now, as a reminder, I don't give couch ratings to documentaries, but this is one you need to rush and put in front of your eyeballs right away. Shiny Happy People, A Teenage Holy War is harrowing and disturbing and heartbreaking, but it's also significantly relevant. Okay, if there were to be another installment of Shiny Happy People, what area of religion would you like them to examine? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.